Hi, this is Swapnil Bhartia and welcome to TFiR Insights. And today we have two guests from SUSE, Dr. Gerald Pfeifer, CTO and openSUSE Chair, and Matthias Eckermann, Director Product Management of Linux Platform at SUSE. First of all, we should be doing it in person, but because of this virus, we are doing it remotely. So we are missing that personal connection here. But it is a topic that has been a pet peeve of mine for a very long time, and that is to bring the SUSE Linux and openSUSE a bit closer. And if I go to the whole thread that was going on mailing list, we are kind of moving in that direction. So first of all, give us a quick overview of the thread that was posted, which is more or less like, bringing a better sync between openSUSE and SUSE.
Yeah, let me start. So historically, for a couple of years now, we have two Linux distributions in the context of openSUSE. One is Tumbleweed, which is a rolling release. I'd call it the latest and greatest. So that keeps flowing and flowing and flowing. There's a new upstream kernel release, it goes into Tumbleweed. There is a new Kubernetes release, it goes into Tumbleweed. A new compiler goes into Tumbleweed. GNOME goes into Tumbleweed. And out of that, at one point in time, then SUSE Linux Enterprise branches, and we have a new major release that only happens every couple of years. What we have done 4 or 5 years ago is create something called openSUSE Leap. And openSUSE Leap gets the source code from SUSE Linux Enterprise and then adds a lot of additional functionality. Because in SUSE Linux Enterprise, we usually have best of breed. So we have 1 or 2 virtualization frameworks, 1 or 2 Windows environments, etc. Whereas in the context of openSUSE or open source, so there is obviously a lot more options. And so taking the stability of SUSE Linux Enterprise by SUSE offering the source code of that for consumption by openSUSE Leap, and then modifying that and building on top of that is what we have had with openSUSE Leap for a number of years now. And that's a more stable, more conservative in a way distribution. And what and Matthias is actually the one who pushed that, proposed it, have on the table right now is, why don't we just share the source code of SUSE Linux Enterprise with openSUSE, but share all the binaries with openSUSE?
And the reason for thinking about this and for offering this to the openSUSE community actually was following multiple approaches. Number one is, to me, it was the logical next step after having done Leap some years ago. And I think it also follows what, as a company logo, we say we are an open company. Being about open, also about the binaries, not about the source code, is, from my perspective, also a logical next step to become even more open towards the community. However, there certainly is also a, let's say, technical reason why this offer was made or this proposal was made to the openSUSE community. And this is to join forces and to reach a bigger footprint in the market and have more importance in the market of Linux distributions, because the SUSE technology and the openSUSE technology, which is, from my perspective, a great, if not say the best Linux technology in multiple aspects, and yes, I have to say that, sorry, this technology can only have an impact on the market if there are not too many different flavors in this. And so this does not mean that from a product management side, we want to decide everything that the community does, but it means that we want to work together with the community to achieve more joint effort in bringing the joint technology diamonds to the bigger community, so the community outside of SUSE as a company and outside of openSUSE community. So it is meant as a joint forces to get more impact together, where we also influence each other in a way that the openSUSE community gets an offer from SUSE, but also SUSE as a company is willing and open to receive input, influence, and suggestions, and more of those from the open source and specifically the openSUSE community.
Now, I have two questions here. Number one question is that I will talk about the chemistry relationship of SUSE and openSUSE, but before that, I want to understand the code flow that you're proposing, because if I'm not wrong, the way I see is that tumbleweed is where everything goes, and then it flows into different openSUSE, as Gerald explained, and it takes from SLE. So how will that look like? What is your proposal where the code will come from? Because sometimes a lot of code, because I don't think that that people can directly contribute to SLE. It has to go through tumbleweed. That is where all the code is dropped, and then it makes as it gets vetted by the community, it goes into Leap. So can you explain the kind of code flow you're proposing, so that the industry players or SUSE customers also have a way to contribute at the same time, community members?
So it all starts with upstream, the different upstream projects where we have people engaged, where I engage in some of them, for example. Then the next step is this continuous integration flowing into tumbleweed, and that's on an ongoing base. That never stops. That's like 24/7, 366 days this year. And at one point in time, we then branched SUSE Linux Enterprise, and that's where enterprise hardening, more documentation, etc. happen. And usually at that point, we don't just pull in new versions, we improve existing versions to converge on then an enterprise release. Now, everything we find, our partners, our users find, and that we fix also goes back into tumbleweed, goes back into the respective upstream projects. So tumbleweed feeds from upstream and is in a way upstream for SUSE Linux Enterprise. And then you look at Leap, and Leap gets both from SUSE Linux Enterprise and from tumbleweed. So think of it as a cake, as a two-layered cake. If you have the biscuit, the thing that you bake in the oven, that is SUSE Linux Enterprise. And that's the base, that's the foundation. And then on top, the cream, I had strawberry cake for my birthday. So the strawberry whatever, that is a lot of additional contents that comes from tumbleweed. So to give you an idea, we're talking about 4,000 packages roughly that are coming from the SUSE Linux Enterprise side. And then on top of that, about 8,000 that come from tumbleweed. So it's a very rich distribution that sits on a very stable foundation. And at any of those integration points, or any time a user or a customer finds something that our engineers or partners or volunteers improve upon, we make a big effort to always push it into the other distributions.
From SUSE side, what I do want to understand is that as you propose this, because the openSUSE community, they are sponsored by SUSE, but they have their own independence. How do you ensure that the openSUSE community does not feel that SUSE is making decisions for them? They can still kind of decide which packages goes in and which package doesn't go in. They have their autonomy. At the same time, it also serves your goal.
Let's first talk about the goal, and then I explain the goal. As I said, is to have a common binary code base where everybody builds upon, so that it is easy for everybody who uses openSUSE to bring this into production and also get services, for example, from SUSE. That is one of the goals. Besides the other goal that I already described before, to really spread the word, spread our message, spread our technology around the world, because we think that the technology that openSUSE and SUSE as a company have developed together is great. Now, how do we ensure, and we have discussed it, I've personally discussed with several members of the openSUSE community, and there are strong advocates about independence and freedom, and that is correct for a community. I think there are three ways that I would highlight how we are trying to ensure this from me as a SUSE employee. Number one is, this is not a mandate, this is an offer or a proposal. So the openSUSE community has the freedom to take what we are suggesting and to see the benefits also for the community, but the openSUSE community is free of saying we don't want this. That is number one. Number two is, because we are not giving the binaries or throwing the binaries over the fence, but because we are already have published the source code years ago, and this will continue certainly, at any point in time, any member of the openSUSE community, and everybody else actually, is free to use this source code and fork it. So that is something that is also important to understand from my perspective. So number one, it is an offer. Number two, the source code and the binaries are public and the source code can be forked. And because we have the build service, this is actually super easy, because it's a few clicks away or one or two commands away to build your own version of what we are publishing. Then there is this third aspect. And that third aspect is, and that has also been raised on the openSUSE mailing list and in the channels, that is that we need to improve the SUSE processes in terms that they are more visible and obvious towards the openSUSE community. This means that we have to re-establish a feature process which makes sense for the community and where the community members are able to directly raise proposals, feature requests, requirements towards those binaries that we are suggesting to share. And also there is a history in our bug tracking tool that it closes down the enterprise bugs in a little bit too much way, too strict way. There is no need to hide bugs as long as they are not containing data which SUSE is not allowed to share. Obviously, we do not share customer or partner data, but everything which is just community related or a normal bug, SUSE should not hide. This needs processes, this needs tools in place, this needs changes to tool setups, and that is a process that we have started in parallel to making the offer to the openSUSE community already. Internally, looking into this, how we can improve and open up our processes so that they get more community relevant, more related to community, and also more important to the community, so that there a real exchange between community and enterprise teams starts, which is obvious. This exchange is already there, but it is not obvious. And then there is a fourth aspect. I talked about the build service. Because we are publishing source code and binaries, everybody can just rebuild the binaries and check what we have done and validate that the outside build and the inside build are identical to what we publish. So that is the three and a half aspects I would see here.
I also see a proposal to create a parallel flavor of openSUSE. What is that about? Are you proposing, just like Leap, another version of SUSE, so that the community can have their own version and you can have a mix of both? Is that what you're proposing?
The proposal is that we are sharing the binaries in SUSE Enterprise and Leap. However, this is not automatically to achieve, because even if Leap starts from the same binary, is from the same source code, the binaries today are not identical because there are some deviations in openSUSE Leap and SUSE Linux Enterprise. I don't want to go into details, but there is an example. There is a setting in systemd in openSUSE which is not there in SUSE Linux Enterprise, and nobody knows why this is in the one and not in the other. So the community has taken another decision. We are looking into this. Why not taking this community proposal also for SUSE Linux Enterprise? And this is basically going on already. This second thing that you're talking about, from our perspective, from what we hope is an intermediate thing to ease and smooth the migration from the current state of openSUSE Leap to a future version of openSUSE Leap, which then would share the binaries with SUSE Linux Enterprise. So it's really about an intermediate state from our perspective, and from the proposal perspective, to not damage anything in openSUSE Leap, because there is a time of migration, there is a time of changing source codes. Actually, the vast majority of that is handled by SUSE for SUSE Linux Enterprise currently. So we are already doing that, but we do not want to propose anything to the community which would create risk for the community. And this is why the proposal of the release management and open build service team is to have a parallel code stream. The working title is Jump, which makes a little bit fun about the name Leap, in the English language. So this is what is the attempt to really smoothen the migration and help everybody to see the benefit in what we are proposing before taking a decision. And it's a multi-step approach, and this parallel thing should help the community to take the right decision.
So if I'm not wrong, this parallel thing is not another member in openSUSE or SUSE family. It's something which is kind of placeholder for a while, as just to smoothen the transition, and also giving the openSUSE community a time to evaluate and see things, instead of saying, hey, you know what, next version is going to be totally binary compatible. I don't care if your user land breaks or if your things break. Is that correct? And over a period of time, either the two of merge, or we will see what happens. But there will always be one SUSE Leap and SLE and Tumbleweed. Is that correct?
As I said, the community has freedom to decide differently, but the proposal is to have Tumbleweed, Leap, and SLE, and then there is this intermediate thing to, as I said, smoothen the process.
As an openSUSE user myself, I think of this as a win-win situation, because this is something that I've been telling for a very long. I mean, I'm not like telling, but been thinking about it, because it's very easy, to be able to leverage the technologies that SUSE is developing when I wear the developer's hat versus the operations hat. I'm coming back to Gerald. You're back online. Is that when you like, as I said, it seems like a win-win situation, but you work closely with openSUSE community, and the openSUSE community involves a lot of other projects also that work with that. What has been their feedback so far?
So in general, I've seen positive feedback with an afterthought of, or a next, but let's see how this works. Let's see how SUSE is going to be opening up some of our tools. For example, the ability to really influence SUSE Linux Enterprise. So not just consume, but contribute actively by means of features and bug reports, for example. And the proof is in the pudding. That's where we took a different approach than we would usually take, or have in the past taken on the enterprise side. So the classic approach in software, non-open source, or even open source when you talk enterprise, is you plan something, you work out, and then you launch. And here we have done obviously some thinking some validation also with some community members. But then we just went out and said, look, here is an offer, here's a proposal, this is how we think it can work. And now let's work together on what this implies here, what you desire there, what can we offer here, what can we open up, how you can contribute. So the way we're handling this proposal in a way is actually open source. It's not like one architecture that's imposed on something. It's like a proposal that has iterative reviews, has incremental steps, and along that way, things improve. So even then, that's definitely not the plan, but even if we were not to proceed, we being SUSE and openSUSE together, ultimately, there is already a lot of improvements on the SUSE Linux Enterprise side. The improvements we're working on in terms of interactions, in terms of collaboration. So along the way, there is actually a lot of gains, and some of the gains we don't even know yet.
This may be a bit uncomfortable question, but you can choose to answer or not answer. And I should not name, but I'm just giving example because we are a Linux community, so we should be free to talk about everybody. Like when I look at Ubuntu, one of the benefits they have is that their platform can be used by developers and to develop and test, and then they can also push that in deployment. They can deploy in the server, and then you can choose to become paid customers. That does not happen with openSUSE. Do you? With Raspberry Pi, when you gave out, it was the same. You can play with openSUSE as much as you want, but if you want to move to production, then you can jump on a subscription. So do you think that would be an ideal kind of place for SUSE and openSUSE, where developers can just use openSUSE as much as they want to develop all those machine learning framework, whatever they want, without having to worry about binary compatibility with SLE? And when they really want to move it to production, they can simply move they don't even have to worry about some kind of complicated migration. They can just move to SUSE's subscription plan and just move their workload. And that is what actually the cloud native world is all about. Just move your workload from one machine to other machine. Is this the ultimate goal? Or if not, do you think that should be?
Yes. So you said it was a difficult question. Actually, it's an easy one. That definitely is one of the goals. For us, the goal is to have one platform for developers. Like you're building a container, you're building a project of yours, which means you need to code RPMs or whatever. And then there's only one platform you have to care about. And we don't have a name for that, but it's Leap/SLE, SLE Leap, whatever. I hope we can come up with something better, which is one target platform. And then you decide, do I want to develop on the enterprise side or on the openSUSE side? Do I want to deploy here? Do I want to deploy there? And that is the ultimate choice and freedom that everyone has.
If you look at SUSE today, I'm talking about from the SUSE side, not openSUSE side, how do you plan to position SUSE? Because we are looking at so many different workloads, especially because of this virus. A lot of people are moving to the cloud. They want to digitize now. It was not yesterday anymore. They have to do it now. So where does this new strategy fit into the bigger picture of SUSE, SLE? You are doing a lot of work with Cloud Foundry. You are doing a lot of work in the Kubernetes space. Talk about that.
On the Linux side, there are not only cloud and data center, but there certainly is also the edge. And SUSE has already for a long time an embedded business. It's not so well known. We are playing with many partners worldwide where SUSE Linux Enterprise is running in. And I think you have mentioned the Raspberry Pi. And actually, the Raspberry Pi is not only good for developers, but there are companies who are using the Raspberry Pi actively and also request our support for edge devices that are, for example, Raspberry Pis and then connected to a bigger network for collecting data and so on. So this is an area where SUSE, I think on the Linux side, has a lot to give, where we also have a lot of background and where we have a lot of technology that can help. So, for example, the open build service is something very valuable. And that helps customers to build packages, to build not only containers, but also customized images for specific, let's say devices or edge devices, right? So this is also something important to look at on the Linux side from my perspective. Gerald, do you want to add something from your CTO perspective of SUSE?
At a very high level, I would say if you look at SUSE 15, 10, even 5 years ago, we were very much focusing on infrastructure. And we still have a very strong focus on that, except that the infrastructure is not necessarily in your data center anymore. It is, and for some customers, it will be forever. Like people still run mainframes successfully with SUSE also. But there may be SUSE at the edge in mobile devices with wheels called cars, not necessarily in a cell phone. There's definitely lots in the cloud from an infrastructure perspective, but equally, if not more, what we are focusing on with various initiatives is actually developers. Because as you mentioned, Swapnil, there is Kubernetes, there is Cloud Foundry, and there is a very agile world that wants to rest on a stable foundation, on a stable infrastructure. But that agile world and how software is developed, how software is deployed, how is it consumed is very different. And so that requires completely different paradigms. That requires things like 12-factor applications. That requires platform as a service, Cloud Foundry, continuous integration, and all sorts of tools. And ultimately, I think you'll see more and more of SUSE in those areas as well. That doesn't mean we leave the infrastructure, but we grow and we build on the infrastructure, even if it's someone else's infrastructure, even if it's a public cloud like Azure or Google, and many others.
Yeah, because developers are king, they are the ones. So, the more these tools are in their hands, it also helps with mindshare also. If they're using the same tools to develop, they're more likely to use the same tools in the production as well. Gerald and Matthias, thanks for taking your time out and explaining very very eloquently and very sophisticatedly how Leap, openSUSE and SUSE are all coming together. And I look forward to seeing you guys in person at some point. I hope that will happen soon, but when it will happen. So once again, thank you.